a story for you guys today. So the name of my talk is Don't Get Your Fingers in the Gears. And what we're talking about here, the point of my talk, is that we are a people of action. We are a people that want and love to take action and need to take action just to feel better, even if what we're doing is spinning its wheels. And by doing so, we don't have the opportunity to get to the miraculous. We miss the opportunity to feel that greater self, that greater part of ourselves that is guiding us all the time in ways that sometimes feel incredibly uncomfortable, but is where the miraculous lives. Now, we can get stuff done. We can get stuff done in the mundane. We can follow strategic plans. We can think things all the way through. We can go step by step in all those kinds of ways that sound so logical, and we will get the results you want, but they won't be miraculous. The only way to get to miraculous results is to be willing to wait for that voice of higher power, of higher self to speak, to actually be willing to hang in the unknown until that voice comes along. So I have walked this road a lot of times, and I got quite a few stories around this, but here's what happened just last week. My son, who is 28, had said he was going into the hospital to have some tests done because he was having some difficulty. And I went up to meet him at the hospital, and he looked like he may have 2 or 3 days to live. He was down to 98 pounds, ashen white, weak as all get up, could hardly walk, as they wheeled him into the hospital to take tests. The tests all came back negative. So he decided, he looked at me and said, "Dad, I need to handle this on my own. I want you to stay out of it." And I sat there looking at my son, who looked like he was about to die. And if anybody knows me, the last thing I wanted to do was stay out of it. But my voice, that voice that I have learned so well to listen to, said, I need to listen to him. I need to, whatever the results be, let him be. So crying my eyes out, I drove home. I was freaking out so bad and realized that if I'm freaking out, I cannot be my centered self. So I looked at my wife and I said, we got to get out of here. We got to go into the woods. I need to be in the woods. That's where I center myself best. And so, being the kind woman she is, she took me into the woods and up to a place called Idlewild. And I went out there and I walked out onto the trail and I went way out. I went so far out that I looked at my phone and I had no signal. I'm out there way about 7,500 feet up, looking out at this extraordinary view when my phone rings. It's my son. He says, I've been in the hospital now 3 days. They haven't figured out anything. I'm scared. Please come help me. So one of the things about once you get the call is I have learned not to hesitate. It's like once I know the action that's the right action to take, I'm on it. Now, obviously, the first thing I did as I was driving home was treat for my son's health and well-being. I thought that should go without saying, but then I thought, nah, let me say it. So we're clear. I've been treating for my son's health and well-being the entire time. And I get this call as I'm looking at this view, this impossible call since I had no service. I get up and I get down the mountain. My wife and I make the 3-hour drive home. And then I repack and make the 3-hour drive to San Luis Obispo which is where he was in the hospital. I get up there, and what I want to say about that is this is the other thing I've learned, is when I wait and take action, when it's the right action, when it's the higher self action, I always have all the resources I need to make that happen. I notice I am at my strongest, my best, and so making that 6-hour drive through traffic and everything else was not even hard. I got up there and I wasn't even tired. That wouldn't have been possible if I tried to do it in the mundane. Because as all of you know, I am sure that when we work in the mundane, it is exhausting. And afterwards, even if we get what we want, we are exhausted. But I have learned by playing in the miraculous that the results I get are not exhausting, but exhilarating and fulfilling and energizing. That's the word I'm trying to really get at here. I feel energized. So I get up there to the hospital, I talk to the doctors, and it turns out that they do know what's going on with him. My son was confused. He came in with a serious, very serious condition that they found, and after 3 days, healed itself miraculously. But it would take him a good month or two now to recover from what had happened to him. And so he still felt sick and would for a while, because that's how long the recovery is going to take. He didn't understand this. Now, the second I looked at my son, he had color in his cheeks. I mean, he was still like under 100 pounds, but he already looked better. He just didn't know this. And so I sat him down, I talked to him, we talked about what is going to happen next. Now, here's the other thing that happens when you take miraculous action instead of mundane action. His mother called me. His mother and I haven't spoken in over a decade. And so we had this incredible healing around all this that never happened before this moment. And so it wasn't just Isaac, my son, who was getting healed. It was Molly and I, his mother and I, who were now also experiencing a healing by waiting for perfect and right time and being willing to come from that place. She wound up flying out. They rented a place for a week. And I spoke to my son yesterday. Actually, I spoke to him even this morning. And he sounds fantastic, fully on his way to recovery, doing incredibly well. All this because I decided not to step in. Now, let me tell you what happened when I decided not to step in. My siblings called and berated me for it. They all called and said, "What are you doing? You have to step in. You're the parent. You know better. You should do this. What do you mean you're going out to the woods? You need to be there with your son." And that's what happens to us, to ourselves, when we think, when that fear is taking over and we think we ought to be taking action before we know what that action even is. It doesn't matter what the circumstance. There is a higher self that it will speak to you at the perfect and right time. There is a miraculous outcome that is possible when we are willing to sit back and wait and be clear and do whatever it takes to move the fear aside, get to that quiet place where true answers can bubble forth and show miraculous results. This isn't the first time. This isn't the second time. This isn't even the 10th time that I have used these principles and put them to work at very difficult moments in my life. This is just the latest. And because it had to do with my son, it may be the most dramatic. But it proves once again that to abandon the truth in our hour of need is to not understand the truth. My favorite Ernest Holmes quote. What we have here is a power that can lead us to miraculous results when we're willing to put the mundane aside, when we are willing to put the logical aside, when certainly we're willing to put our fear aside Each of us has this. I am no special being here. We all have this power. It takes practice. It takes time. It takes a willingness to sit quietly and be in the quiet no matter how afraid we are. Because I promise you, I was deathly afraid of what would happen to my son. But I knew that if I waited and was quiet enough, the results would be miraculous, and certainly they have been. That's what's there for you, for each and every one of you. Miraculousness, if you are willing to play in that realm, to be quiet enough to deal with your fear and move beyond whatever you think your fear is trying to get you to do. The beingness and the action out of that beingness, that's where miraculousness lives. Thank you. I love you.